Get right game for the Texas Longhorns, belt to ass, as the kids would say, 49-17 Texas over the Florida Gators.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis, your host. It's Monday, so Tony Monk from Spot On Sports joining me once again. You all will be pleased to know that Tony's contract has been renewed for the 2025 season. He'll be back next year every Monday on the show as well to talk Texas and SEC football. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by FanDuel. Start the season with a big return on, well, not start the season, but you get a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. As always with Tony, the first segment, Florida takeaways and reactions. The second segment, the players of the game. And in the third segment, we finally get to talk about Johntay Cook no longer being with the Texas program. His intention will be to enter the transfer portal at the end of the season. All of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Once again, the second reaction to Texas beating the Florida Gators 49-17 at home in DKR. 3 games left in the regular season. Arkansas, Kentucky, and then Texas A&M. Especially with another Georgia loss, Texas is sitting pretty, and another LSU loss. Texas is sitting pretty to take care of business and get to the SEC championship game and possibly get a first-round bye in the playoffs. But one foot in front of the other, we're going to talk about Florida. Now, my first takeaway is this is what the Steve Sarkisian offense is supposed to look like. Tony, it's like when you were a kid and your parents or whoever, they would be like, you can get in the water. Like, it ain't going to hurt you. Like, you didn't want to get in the water. You know what I'm saying? But they was like, you can get in the water. It ain't going to hurt you. And then you got in the water. You was like, this ain't, this really ain't that bad. You know what I'm saying? I feel like that's what Steve Sarkisian had to tell Quinn Ewers, right? He had to tell Quinn Ewers, like, you can get in the water, Quinn. Like, it ain't that bad. You can throw the ball deep. Like, it ain't that bad, right? You know what I'm saying? And Quinn was like, you sure, Sark? You sure I can throw the ball deep?
60 size, man. Go ahead.
And then we saw him grow up a little bit on Saturday. Coming into the game, his highest average depth of target. I've been talking about this a lot over the last couple of weeks because it was just painfully obvious. Like, Quinn, why are you throwing all these screens, bro? Like, and all these checkdowns. His average depth of target, his highest in any game this season coming into the Florida game was 6.3. That was in his first game against Colorado State. His average on the season was 5.9. In a Steve Sarkisian offense, really just period in college football. That was crazy. Against Vanderbilt, it was 5.4, right? I mean, he turned this offense into a glorified dink and dunk offense. I said that. Against Florida, 9.4. I think you just saw it. Like, you just saw it in his eyes. You saw it in his movement. Like, every play when he snapped the ball, he immediately just was looking deep, right? And not just looking deep, he was taking those opportunities, throwing the ball down the field, just chunking it, right? And credit to the offensive line for making sure that he had the time to do that. Credit to the wide receivers for getting open. He wasn't throwing 50-50 balls. The wide receivers were wide open down the field. All he had to do was put it in their radius. But we saw the maturation of Quinn Ewers on Saturday. I thought it was his best game of the year. You could maybe say Michigan, because of the stakes, but Michigan hasn't looked great at all. But man, I just, his willingness to adjust and throw the ball down the field when we haven't seen that all season, especially at that rate. I mean, damn, he looked like Arch Man. No, I'm just playing, but what I'm saying? Like, he was really putting the ball down the field, and that's what a Steve Sarkisian offense is supposed to look like. I went back and crunched the numbers because I won't say I crunched the numbers. I paid for a Pro Football Focus subscription, but they always talk about that 2020. They always talk about that 2020 Sark offense, right? With Mac Jones and Devontae Smith, where Mac Jones was a top 3 Heisman candidate. Devontae Smith won it, and they said that was kind of the pinnacle of Steve Sarkisian's offense, right? Like, that was when he was in his bag the most. Mac Jones' average depth of target that year was 8.8 yards, right? That is what the Steve Sarkisian offense is supposed to look like. You're supposed to attack the defense consistently down the field, and we saw Quinn Ewers do that once again. 9.4 yards average depth of target, 333 yards, career high, 5 touchdowns. We saw Quinn Ewers grow up on Saturday. That was a beautiful performance. Look, Obviously, as a quarterback, you're going to have some screen passes to get him comfortable, and you're going to have check downs. There's just going to be some times where the defense dictates that. But the Steve Sarkisian offense is not a throw a bunch of short passes and pray for some yak offense, right? It is a throw it over their head type of offense, and that's what we saw Quinn Ewers do on Saturday, throw it over their head. I was so proud of him. He grew up, even doing some little celebrations with the offensive line. He looked like he was having fun playing football again. All right, that's enough about Quinn. My second takeaway is for the first time since Steve Sarkisian has started calling offense, he may not get his 1,000-yard rusher this year. We're going to give him a caveat because Cedric Baxter did get hurt, but it's just not looking pretty. Would you believe that Trey Wisner did not have a single rushing yard yesterday or on Saturday? He had 4 carries for, I think, like -1 yards or 0 yards. It's crazy. So when you look at it, Trey Wisner has 409 yards. Jaden Blue has 376, and Jared Gibson has 327. At most, you have 8 games left, right? You have 3 regular season games left. You have the SEC championship game. If you win it, then you would only play in 3 playoff games because you get a first round bye. If you lose it, then you would have 4 playoff games to get to the national championship, right? So if Texas loses the SEC championship game, which we want to happen, they at most have 8 games left. For one of these players to get 1,000 yards, Trey Wisner would have to average 74 yards per game in every game moving forward. Jaden Blue would have to average 78 yards per game in every game moving forward. If they only play 7 or less, then obviously that average has to go up. Does not look like Steve Sarkisian is going to get his 1,000-yard rusher. It looks like that streak is going to end this year. But dare I say that Texas is still a championship contender even without a dominant running back this year. Third thing, and then I'm going to pass it to you, Tony. We talked about when you lose Byron Murphy and T'Vondre Sweat, it's damn near impossible to replace that type of production. Maybe not. When we look at what Alfred Collins has done this year, especially in the run game, it's been pretty comparable to what we saw from Byron Murphy and T'Vondre Sweat. We put in this $26 a month to use from Pro Football Focus. Byron Murphy last year, 91.1 defensive grade, 80.5 run defense grade. Last year, T'Vondre Sweat, 91.7 defensive overall grade, 92 run defensive grade. We saw Alfred Collins jump off our screen on Saturday. This season, 85.6 defensive grade, 90.2 run defensive grade. He has essentially been as good as T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy were last year against the run. Now, the big difference is getting pressure on the quarterback, right? Where he only has a 67.6 grade this year. Last year, T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy were both over 85 plus, but Texas still had one of the worst pass defenses in the country. Alfred Collins has done his part to replicate what we got from T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy in terms of the run defense last year, and he had a very special performance on Saturday against Florida. Go ahead, Tony.
Well, very, very complete game by Texas yesterday. I think even when you get ready to play a team that has 10 plus guys, about 14 to be exact, names on an injury list, then you're probably supposed to come out and stomp a mud hole into them. Well, the thing about lining up with easy teams, these are the games where I'm like, okay, if I want to see, like, do everything you need to do to get back on track. Do what you need to do to get Quinn loose again. Do what you need to do to get the run game where you want to be. Do what you need to do to get your defense back in its fits. Like, do all of those things and then blow Florida out at the same time. That's exactly what we saw yesterday. Kudos to Quinn Ewers, man. Seriously, kudos to Quinn Ewers. The last couple of games had not been good. Perhaps the bye week was a very good reset for this team because sometimes even the best teams need a nice little mental reset to get things together. Quinn comes out yesterday and he looked like he sat down with Arch Manning over the last week. And he said, look, dude, you see that guy that's running 50 yards downfield? You can actually throw him the ball and he'll go score faster than dumping it off to the running backs. And just watch how that works out for you. Quinn goes, oh, okay. And now what we see is a little bit of Quinn Ewers from Odin. You mentioned earlier that this possibly could have been his best game since Michigan. I think it was. Again, Michigan at the time was Michigan. People thought Michigan was going to be these things and Texas lines up again when they beat them. Now they're not. That's a whole different story now, John. Weeks ago, though, Michigan was Michigan, and Quinn went out there and played one of his best games. But I think this was just so much better than that. Again, taking those shots downfield, whole lot of confidence. Outside the first couple of drives for Texas, which just was kind of a little bit wonky, they got right back on track, and they didn't look back ever since then. So I was very glad to see. Again, I always say skins on the wall as far as Salk and his coaching offensively. Look backwards, say, you know what? Let's go ahead and scheme it up today. Let's go ahead and really get these guys open downfield. Take a little bit of what we were doing, and we can say that now, John, because we've seen Arch in so much action this season. Let's take a little bit of what we're doing with Arch, right? Because the offensive scheme just changes so much dynamically when he hits the field, and let's actually do some of this with Ewers. And then, yes, tell your quarterback to take the shots. It's there. It's okay. Florida was a team that had allowed over 30 receptions of 20 plus yards. Take the chances. If you're going to do anything today, take our shots deep. Let's take them well. Again, going to the whole running back situation, it's funny to hear you name off all of those stats and everything, because this is just an everybody offense at this point. Everybody's going to come in. Texas is going to hit you in waves. When it comes offense, they're going to send out the A team, and then they're going to send out the AB-ish team, and then that's when they're going to hit you with Jaden Blue and Gunnar Helm, and you're going to get a little bit of Ryan Wingo mixed into that. But in the start, I just really like how they was able to kind of get the ball. A lot of these guys, no Texas receiver is probably going to lead the game a lot of the times with anywhere past 4 to 5 receptions, because there's going to be 7 to 8 other guys on the roster that's going to have the same amount of yards and carries and everything else and receptions that you are going to have. So again, one of the things that I asked John was I wanted this team to be able to identify who are going to be those guys during the moments where you're going to need them the most, because we're only going to hope around the time that playoffs come around that look at the stat line, almost over 600 yards of offense, and that's going to be the case in 3 to 4 of the most important games that Texas is going to be playing this season versus what happened when we can only rely on Trinquavian Wisner? What happens if we only have to rely on Bond because or Golden, because these are the guys that's actually eating? I mean, hey, if we continue to be able to keep spreading around, John, I'm not going to be one to try to go against the grain and start arguing that. If we can come out and establish a sense of identity with 8 different guys on offense, let's ride it out until we have to figure out something else. Don't mind that in the background, because we're still trying to figure out how come this stuff has all these little special effects. But that's for you, Texas. That's for you. Those are my takeaways, John. Again, very proud. My thing is more on Quinn and him being able to come out and be confident, right? I still think this defense is one of the best. We obviously see that. But when you're facing a team with so many injuries, they don't even have a starter, Lagway and those guys having to sit out. Yeah, I expect to come out with a game where you put up 49 points in a very easy relative win. But very proud of what he was able to do yesterday.
Yeah, you're supposed to, like you said, you're supposed to, come out and beat a team like this. There's been plenty of games where, teams were undermanned and still came out and, made it a dogfight or made it interesting at the end. And, Texas certainly took care of business. I think they were up 42-3 at one point. And like you said, if you're going to go against a team that is missing 4 defensive starters in the defensive backfield, it's the perfect time for, to get in Quinn Ewers' ear and say, hey, throw the ball down the field. And we saw, because I'm not going to believe that Steve Sarkisian was calling plays differently for Arch Manning, right? Quinn Ewers was just looking short rather than deep. Like, you're supposed to look deep first and then come back short in terms of your progressions. Quinn was like, oh, my running back's open here. You know what I'm saying? And against Florida, he was like, oh, damn, my wide receiver is open 40 yards down the field. I should probably throw it and look 333 yards and 5 touchdowns. He realized it's okay to put his foot in the water, and the offense looked the best. Maybe it's looked all season, or certainly since, the best has looked in the last couple of games. Quick word from our sponsors, and then we get into the players of the game who really showed out against the Florida Gators. All right, today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by Gametime, right? Gametime has a new feature, called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Whether it's the Kentucky game in DKR, potentially the last home game of the season, or the Moody Center, we know basketball has gotten started for the men and the women. Make sure you're using Gametime to get the best deals on those seats. Also, all-in pricing toggling this feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Seat views get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. The lowest price guarantee or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Gametime ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime Picks. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, bringing Tony back in, talking about our players of the game. Tony, who stood out to you on Saturday against the Florida Gators?
The first name we got to mention got to be Quinn, because this is actually a time we get to say his name, and he did every single thing in the book right that you could do on Saturday. So yes, Quinn,
And
this
hold
is
on,
for you.
real quick. I feel like we gave him a sympathy players of the game like one day, like when he came back
We
and was
did,
like
'cause
all right against
he fought
Vanderbilt,
through, yeah, the mental
or
aspect.
maybe it was Oklahoma. We was like, all right, you know what I'm saying? But
Yeah,
like,
we was excited for it, but that's okay. This is your starting quarterback. This is your guy. This is the guy that's going to lead you to the championship, and you needed to see that he had fully moved on to the last couple of games that's been happening. He comes out, he throws 5 touchdowns. Yes, Quinn. Yes, you are one of our players of the game. I'm sure he's going to be on your list, John. He deserves that praise. Yeah, Florida lined up and they was missing all these guys on defense, but he had things in his monsters in his claws that he had to personally work through, and it was Sark. I want to give a lot of kudos to Sark. Can we use a coach as like a person of the game? Can we do that?
yeah, for sure. He was in
Okay,
his
cool.
bag. He was in his bag.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw Quinn in, Sark in
I
this.
ain't never seen a fake handoff, fake reverse to a reverse. Like I don't know what
Yeah,
that
like
was. Like
pull all the stops out. Do anything that you need to do to get your guys supplanted in that role again. Again, I've been kind of giving him some built-up praise leading up to this moment with them over the past couple of weeks, because you had to coach, you had to figure out what do we need to do to get Quinn out of this funk that he's in. He's pushing the ball downfield. Quinn didn't look like that. It didn't look like that in about last 5 or 6 weeks. So yes, of course, we should be including him in part of this. And I'm going to give love to the running backs too. With Jadon Blue and Jared Gibson. Gibson obviously hits 100 yards. It seems like, no, these guys may not be able to rush for 1,000 yards, but I love the combinations that Sark is able to really supply with his running back room, whether it's Craven Wisner, whether it's Gibson, or whether it's Jaden Blue. Jaden Blue out the backfield is a very nice touch to the guy that you have being a bell cow in front of him. Yeah, he's not the starter guy no more. He's not the guy that we thought he was going to be, but he's definitely still highly impactful. So that's that for my players of the game. I think Andrew McCooper for defensively wise. You said Colin Alfred earlier. Definitely a guy that's been holding it down in that run game. McCooper comes back and gets an interception. He's finally healthy now, so it's good to see him flying around, moving around. I see a little bit more Trey Moore again. Right, I'm just mentioning his name just in the spots and him being active. He was active not last week, the week before last, before they hit the bye week. But again, more or less on the offensive side of the ball, with them just being able to explode all over the place. So those are my names as far as players of the game and Coach Sark.
yeah, for sure. I think Quinn Ewers and Alfred Collins. I wrote them down just because it goes without saying. Quinn Ewers, like you said, just coming out and really growing up, before our eyes, and like you said, getting over those demons and just pushing the ball down the field, and then playing clean football with it. Not throwing any picks or not fumbling the ball, like I said. But he also wasn't throwing 50-50 balls. Credit to Sark getting those guys open, and credit to those guys running really good routes and getting open down the field. And then Alfred Collins, when you can tip 2 balls that end up getting intercepted by Andrew McCooper, one of your players of the game, and then Ty Anthony Smith, just a dominant game up front at defensive tackle. I want to start with Jaden Blue, but 8 touches for 127 yards and a touchdown. He had a 45-yard run and a 45-yard reception. When Cedric Baxter went down with injury, we thought this is the type of performance we would see on the regular from Jaden Blue, right? Just one of the most explosive players in the country. Somebody that you could use in the running game and in the receiving game, and could hit his head on the goalpost with, any touch you give him. And then due to some fumbling and just the emergence of Trey Wisner, we haven't necessarily seen that. But I thought this was a vintage Jaden Blue game based on his skill set. And he also had 127 total yards. He should have had more. He had that catch on the sideline. What are we doing, refs? I mean, not advocating it, but they should have thrown water bottles on the field for that one. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, that's clearly a catch. Clearly had his foot in. Clearly had control. You took that away from him. So he should have had even more than 127 total yards, which is a complete game from Jaden Blue. Really love to see that. Isaiah Bond, he had not been healthy, obviously pulled his hamstring, whatever he did in the Oklahoma game. I don't think he played at all against Georgia. If he did, I don't remember. And then Vanderbilt, he just wasn't himself. So really the last 3 games, he wasn't healthy at all. He was certainly healthy, this past Saturday. And, you talked about who's the most explosive player on this football team, or who are the 2 most explosive. I think it's Jaden Blue and Isaiah Bond. And I think that we saw on Saturday against Florida, when they're both at their best, this offense is hell to stop. Isaiah Bond, only 4 touches, but 99 total yards, a 44-yard run on one of the craziest schemed plays you'll ever see. Shout out to Steve Sarkisian for that. And then a 34-yard screen touchdown, you know what I mean, where you just give him the ball and you let him be Isaiah Bond. And he hits his head on the goalpost and then hits the little James Bond, celebration. So, shout out to Isaiah Bond. Like I said, offense just look completely different with him healthy. He still is your alpha in that room, 8, 9 guys, whatever. Isaiah Bond is your number one option. Trey Moore, right? Somebody who had 22.5 sacks over the last 2 years at UTSA. Would you believe he didn't get his first sack of the season until the 9th game of the year? Now, look, in the NIL era, I still think his money well spent. He's still been getting pressure on the quarterback. He's still been stopping people in the run game, but you paid him to get sacks, and he finally got a sack. He finally got that monkey off his back and got his first sack, and also got a big fumble recovery. You talked about those first couple of drives where, Texas was still kind of getting into rhythm. And then I thought when they forced that fumble, when Florida was just trying to get a 3rd down run and punt it, and Anthony Hill forced the fumble, Trey Moore got it, and then Texas gets their first 7 points of the game. I thought that was huge. So Trey Moore had a big game. Like I said, he's been playing well, just didn't have the sacks to show for it. Finally got on the board in that department. And I want to give credit to the starting offensive line. Right. The last 2 games, we saw Quinn Ewers pressured over 20 times, sacked 11 times. We could talk about Quinn Ewers not getting the ball down the field and turning the ball over and not looking as comfortable. But part of that is on the offensive line to make him comfortable. They did what they needed to do to make him comfortable on Saturday. Only 3 pressures allowed, right? Still probably more than you want to see, but only 3 compared to 20 plus over the last couple of weeks. And then 1 sack where, DJ Campbell and Cam Williams just didn't handle a stunt too well. They got in there and sacked Quinn Ewers on 3rd down. But outside of that, I thought they played a phenomenal game. And that's one of the biggest reasons that, Texas had an offensive explosion on Saturday. So just a great performance, really from all units. Bert Auburn missed another field goal. Hopefully that doesn't come back to bite you. In the bigger games, but I thought special teams, offense, and defense were great. And one point I should have made in the first segment, but I'm gonna make it now. We're still gonna have, because of our playmakers, those explosive plays in terms of the checkdowns and the short passes, right? We saw Quinn be able to push the ball down the field, but you still were able to get the 34-yard screen pass for a touchdown to Isaiah Bond, a 50-yard screen pass to Trey Wisner, or swing pass, whatever you want to call it, touchdown pass to Trey Wisner, and then a 45-yard, check down to Jaden Blue. So I think it was the perfect game for Quinn Ewers because you were able to push the ball down the field. Would have had more yards if DeAndre Moore would have showed up on Saturday. But you were able to push the ball down the field and get those big plays. But then you were also still able to get really good yak from making the smart decisions and dumping it off to some of your best playmakers on the field. So just great performance all around. No complaints outside of Bert Auburn missing a field goal, but he's one of my favorite players on the team. So we give him a pass. It hasn't affected us yet. All right, quick word from our sponsors. And we talk about a former member, it hurts to say, a former member of the Texas Longhorns, Johntay Cook, no longer with the program as of this week. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns also brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the National Football League all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. So that's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. All right, here we go. Almost kicked Tony off the show. All right, there we go. All right, talking about Johntay Cook. We got the news. We noticed we hadn't seen him the last couple of weeks. It's funny because Chris Jackson and the wide receivers, they went to some type of event. They did something. I think maybe they went to support DeAndre Moore at his food truck. You noticed every single wide receiver in the program, but Johntay Cook. And all the fans was like, where's Johntay at? And then Chris Jackson was like, oh, Johntay was sick. And then a week later, he's dismissed. He's no longer with the program. So was he sick, Chris? Was he sick? Are you lying to us, Chris? But either way, man, this is my first chance I get to really talk about it. And, it's tough. him going to DeSoto, me and Tony both, being from the Dallas area, have a kind of more of a connection, a special connection with the kids from this area. And, Johntay Cook, I thought he was the next big thing at the University of Texas. You can question Steve Sarkisian's decision to bring in 3 wide receivers from the portal when you had Ryan Wingo, DeAndre Moore, and Johntay Cook waiting in the wings. But, coming into the season, they only had 8 combined catches, and they were all from Johntay Cook. And so in a season as important as this one, you can't blame Steve Sarkisian for saying, I need more experience. I need more playmaking at the wide receiver position. And you can't turn down guys like Isaiah Bond and Matthew Golden. I mean, we've seen what they've meant to this team this year. As far as Johntay Cook, I think it's tough. I'm not going to sit here and say that he's going to be the piece that determines whether we win a championship or not. But I'm also not going to sit here and say that losing a guy like Johntay Cook is just blah, right? I mean, this is a special route runner, really fast kid, really electric playmaker with the ball in his hands. I know he had that big drop against Mississippi State, but he's been special for us, right? It's funny because last year, 8 catches for 136 yards. This year, 8 catches, 137 yards. Like, at least he's consistent, right? But averaging over 17 yards of reception at the University of Texas, just a special playmaker. And obviously it didn't work out. What I heard is, lack of playing time led to a bad attitude, and then a bad attitude led to a lack of playing time. And I compare it to the Evan Stewart situation, right? Because they grew up together. They're probably the same receiver. Maybe Johntay Cook is a little bit of a diva, right? It doesn't matter if Texas is winning or not. I want the ball. You know what I'm saying? And that's what makes those type of guys special. That's kind of what wires them. But I can also make them those type of guys that can be held to deal with when they're not happy. We saw Evan Stewart. We heard the same thing. Culture issues behind the scene at Texas A&M. He goes to Oregon. Now he's balling out. He's getting the ball. We don't hear anything, right? And I think it'll be the same thing for Johntay Cook. He's going to go somewhere next year. He's going to get the ball. He's going to be one of the best playmakers in the country. But unfortunately, it just didn't work out at Texas. And I thought he would be the next big thing. But, they say God laughs at us when we make plans. So go ahead, Tony.
Yeah. He came in with a really good class. Featured Arch, CJ Baxter, and all of those guys. Ryan Wingo was also a part of that. And then you figured, hey, in the next 2-3 years, you're going to have Arch, you're going to have Ryan, CJ, and Johntay Cook. That's the offense. So we're going to take it to the moon. And then all of a sudden, this kid hits the transfer portal. And with valid reason, he was not playing, John. He's in with the backups. If Arch touched the field, granted that it's not a Quinn Ewers situation going on, you're not going to see Johntay touch the field. And when he does, it's a catch here or a catch there, and he's got the same stat line he did up to this point. Yeah, a kid like that coming from DeSoto, like I said, we pay attention to a lot with the school down here. Those are ballers. They produce ballers. You expect a guy like him to be able to come in, honestly, relatively early and be able to play and attribute something to this team. And now sometimes it just doesn't flow that way. Sometimes you get phased out of the offense due to a bevy of things kind of happening. The guys that's in front of you and the way that they're being utilized. And Johntay does catch me as a receiver that does need to be on the field a lot, possibly not leave the field. Again, we're not sure how much goes into practice ways. And yeah, maybe it's the diva thing. Maybe, hey, I'm not getting in the game, so I'm not going to go hard for these things no more because you're not going to play me anyway. And a lot of those factors begin to attribute to why you're 6 or 7 on the receiver depth chart, where honestly, if almost everybody doesn't play, you're right. Like, it's either you really are playing today or you're probably not, just because there's just so many guys in front of you. And opportunity is opportunity. You feel as a receiver like Cook that, hey, I'm very good. I should be on somebody's team. I should be attributed to help us win games, especially on one of the biggest stages in the SEC, and I'm not being involved. Guys like Wingo and Bowden have seen increased reps over the last couple of weeks. Where are mine? I don't have those. And so, yeah, I get it. It sucks to say because you love to see the eventual talent, especially with a lot of the talent that Texas has on this roster. Correct me if I'm wrong, John, 11 true freshmen that are part of this roster. And a lot of those guys have played and have been really good in some of the stints that we've seen them. You would have wanted Johntay to stay and be a part of all this action. And then next year, who knows, we're lighting up the field and the offense is young and electric. But unfortunately, that's not really the case. Obviously, there's a couple of teams that can possibly be in consideration of that back here at home. SMU possibly as a landing spot for him. Maybe what Oregon is doing. I don't know. Georgia could be making some little push or whatever the case
I
is.
said if he could dance, he need to go to LSU. I want to see Johntay Cook at LSU. If he could dance, if he could trip out, if he could get the gat, he need to go to LSU for real. He'll turn up at LSU.
Yeah,
I think wherever Johntay Cook goes next year, like I said, I just compare it to the Evan Stewart situation. Maybe it's a lazy comparison because they grew up together. But like I said, we saw this at Texas A&M. We're wondering, like, why is not Evan Stewart not balling like he should be? And then now we're seeing that at Oregon. I think Johntay Cook, wherever he goes next year, he'll ball out. It just didn't work out. But he's way too talented to have 16 catches through 2 seasons at the University of Texas. And somebody will take advantage of it next year. And Texas will be fine because you're bringing in 3 5-stars a year. Then you're getting the best guys out of the portal, maybe just got over recruited or maybe got outworked.
I mean, that's a possibility.
It didn't work out.
Yeah, you start having a lot of guys in, and it's much easier than you think. Just because you're bringing in all of these 5-star, 4-star recruits or whatever the case is, the idea is to always say we're going to get as many of them, or we're going to get all of them on the field as possible. And that's never just naturally a thing. Sometimes a guy in front of you makes this magnificent jump, and then he doesn't leave the field. Sometimes they happen to bring this one guy in that they only anticipated, right, filling a small role, and all of a sudden this role is much bigger. So it happens. Texas fans, I don't want y'all to think that there was not anything that could have been done or there was nothing done at all for Johntay Cook to be able to touch the field. It just didn't work. That's the nature of the game and building a team. That's the nature of the game and building a roster. And that's the nature of the game and playing football. However, we do wish Johntay Cook the best in his future endeavors.
Absolutely. Like I said, I'm excited for wherever he goes next year. I think he's going to be special. Thank y'all for tuning in to another episode of Locked on Longhorns. Once again, Tony here every Monday for the rest of the season, and he'll be back for the 2025 season as well. Hug 'em. Peace.